This is Tom Garfield. It was my pleasure to be the superintendent at Logos School for its first 35 years. As I finished that stint, I wrote a book called Non Nobis, which was the story of that first beginning of Logos School. I now am the Dean of Academics at Veritas Scholars Academy out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I'll be reading from the translation by Richmond Latimer, and it belongs to my wife, I have to say, because she reads these things a lot more than I do. The Iliad, Book 19. Now dawn, the yellow-robed, arose from the river of ocean to carry her light to men and to immortals. And Thetis came to the ships and carried with her the gifts of Hephaestus. She found her beloved son lying in the arms of Patroclus, crying shrill, and his companions in their numbers about him mourned. She, shining among divinities, stood there beside them. She clung to her son's hand and called him by name and spoke to him. My child, now, though we grieve for him, we must let this man lie dead, in the way he first was killed through the gods' designing. Accept rather from me the glorious arms of Hephaestus, so splendid, and such as no man has ever worn on his shoulders. The goddess spoke so and set down the armor on the ground before Achilles, and all its elaboration clashed loudly. Trembling took hold of all the mermaidens. None had the courage to look straight at it. They were afraid of it. Only Achilles looked, and as he looked, the anger came harder upon him, and his eyes glittered terribly under his lids, like sun flare. He was glad, holding in his hands the shining gifts of Hephaestus, but when he had satisfied his heart with looking at the intricate armor, he spoke to his mother and addressed her in winged words. My mother, the god has given me these weapons. They are such as are the work of immortals. No mortal man could have made them. Therefore now I shall arm myself in them. Yet I am sadly afraid during this time for the warlike son of Monostus, that flies might get into the wound, beaten by bronze in his body, and breed worms in them, and make these foul the body, seeing that the life is killed in him, and that all his flesh may be rotted. In turn, the goddess Thetis, the silver-footed, answered him, My child, no longer let these things be a care in your mind. I shall endeavor to strive from him the swarming and fierce things, those flies, which feed upon the bodies of men who have perished. And although he lies here till a year has gone to fulfillment, still his body shall be as it was, or firmer than ever. Go then, and summon into assembly the fighting Achaeans, and unsay your anger against Agamemnon, shepherd of the people, and arm at once for the fighting, and put your war strength upon you. She spoke so, and drove the strength of great courage into him, and meanwhile, through the nostrils of Patroclus she distilled ambrosia and red nectar, so that his flesh might not spoil. But he, brilliant Achilles, walked along by the seashore, crying his terrible cry, and stirred up the fighting Achaeans. And even those who before had stayed where the ships were assembled, they who were helmsmen of the ships and handled the steering oar, they who were stewards among the ships and dispensers of rations, even these came to assembly, since now Achilles had appeared, after straying so long from the sorrowful battle. And there were two who came limping among them, henchmen of Ares, both, Thetis, son the staunch in battle, and brilliant Odysseus, leaning on spears, since they had the pain of their wounds yet upon them, and came and took their seats in the front rank of those assembled. And last of them came in the lord of men, Agamemnon, with a wound on him, seeing that Coon, the son of Anator, had stabbed him with the bronze edge of the spear in the strong encounter. But now, when all the Achaeans were in one body together, Achilles of the swift feet stood up before them and spoke to them. Son of Atreus, was this, after all, the better way for you, both, for you and me, that we, for all our heart's sorrow, quarreled together for the sake of a girl in soul-perishing hatred? I wish Artemis had killed her beside the ships with an arrow on that day when I destroyed Lernarsus and took her. But thus, not all these too many Achaeans would have been bitten in the dust by enemy hands when I was away in my anger. This way was better for the Trojans and Hector, yet I think the Achaeans will too long remember this quarrel between us. Still, we will let all this be a thing of the past, though it hurts us, and beat down by constraint the anger that rises inside us. Now I'm making an end of my anger. It does not become me unrelentingly to rage on. Come then, the more quickly drive on the flowing-haired Achaeans into the fighting, so that I may go up against the Trojans and find out if they wish to sleep outside their ships. I think, rather, they will be glad to rest where they are. Whoever among them gets away with his life from the fury of our spear's onset. He spoke, and the strong, grieved Achaeans were pleasured to hear him, and how the great-hearted son of Peleus unsaid his anger. Now among them spoke forth the lord of men, Agamemnon, from the place where he was sitting, and did not stand up among them. Fighting men and friends, Odoneans, henchmen of Ares, it is well to listen to the speaker. It is not becoming to break in on him. This will be hard for him, though he be able. How among the great murmur of people shall anyone listen or speak either? A man, though he speak very clearly, is baffled. I shall address the son of Peleus, that all you other Argives listen also, and give my word careful attention. This is the word the Achaeans have spoken often against me, and found fault with me in it. Yet I am not responsible, but Zeus is, and Destiny, and Erinus, the mist-walking, who in assembly caught my heart in the savage delusion. On that day, I myself stripped from him the prize of Achilles. Yet what could I do? It is the god who accomplishes all things. Delusion is the elder daughter of Zeus, the accursed who deludes all. Her feet are delicate, and they step not on the firm earth, but she walks the air above men's heads and leads them astray. She has entangled others before me. Yes, for once, Zeus even was deluded, though men say he is the highest one of gods and mortals. Yet Hera, who is female, deluded even Zeus in her craftiness on that day, when in strong, walled, circled Thebe, alchemy was at her time, to bring forth the strength of Hercules. Therefore, Zeus spoke forth, and made a vow before all the immortals. Hear me, all you gods and all the goddesses. Hear me while I speak forth what the heart within my breast urges. This day, Eileithyia of women's child pains shall bring forth a man to the light who, among the men sprung of the generation of my blood, shall be lord over all those dwelling about him. Then, in guileful intention, the lady Hera said to him, You will be a liar, not put fulfillment on what you have spoken. Come then, Lord of the Olympus, and swear before me a strong oath, that he shall be lord over all those dwelling about him, who this day shall fall between the feet of a woman, that man who is born of the blood of your generation. So Hera spoke, and Zeus was entirely unaware of her falsehood, but swore a great oath, and therein lay all his deception. But Hera, in a flash of speed, left the horn of Olympus, and came rapidly to Argos of Achaia, where she knew was the mighty wife of Sthenelus, descended of Perseus. And she was carrying a son, and this was the 7th month for her. But she brought him sooner into the light, and made him premature, and stayed the childbirth of Alcmene, and held back the birth pangs. She went herself and spoke the message to Zeus, son of Cronos. Father Zeus of the shining bolt, I will tell you a message for your heart. A great man is born, who will be lord over the Argives. Eurystheus, the son of Sthenelus, the seed of Perseus, your generation. It is not unfit that he should rule over the Argives. She spoke, and the sharp sorrow struck deep in his heart. He caught by the shining hair of her head the goddess Delusion in the anger of his heart, and swore a strong oath that never after this might Delusion, who deludes all, come back to Olympus and the starry sky. So speaking, he whirled her about in his hand and slung her out of the starry heaven, and presently she came to men's establishments. But Zeus would forever grieve over her each time that he saw his dear son doing some shameful work of the tasks that Eurycleus set him. So in my time, when tall Hector of the shining helm was forever destroying the Argives against the stern of their vessels, could not forget delusion the way I was first deluded. But since I was deluded, and Zeus took my wits away from me, I am willing to make good and give back gifts in abundance. Rise up then to the fighting and rouse the rest of the people. Here am I to give you all these gifts, as many as brilliant Odysseus yesterday went to your shelter and promised. Or, if you will, hold back. though you lean hard into the battle, while my followers take the gifts from my ship and bring them to you, so you may see what I give to comfort your spirit." Then in answer to him spoke Achilles of the swift feet. "Son of Atreus, most lordly and king of men, Agamemnon, the gifts are yours to give, if you wish, and as it is proper, or to keep with yourself. But now let us remember our joy in warcraft immediately, for it is not fitting to stay here and waste time, nor delay, since there is still a big work to be done. No, so can a man see more Achilles among the front fighters with a bronze spear wrecking the Trojan battalions. Therefore let each of you remember this and fight his antagonist." Then in answer to him spoke resourceful Odysseus. "Not that way, good fighter, that you are, godlike Achilles. Do not drive the sons of Achaeans on Ilion when they are hungry, to fight against the Trojans, since not short will be the time of battle, once the massed formations of men have encountered together with the god-inspiring fury in both sides. Rather, tell the men of Achaea here by their swift ships to take food and wine, since these make fighting fury and warcraft. For a man will not give strength to fight his way forward all day long until the sun goes down if he is starved for food. Even though in his heart he be very passionate for the battle, yet without his knowing, his limbs will grow heavy, and hunger and thirst will catch up with him and cumber his knees as he moves on. But when a man has been well filled with wine and with eating, and then does battle all day long against the enemy, why, then the heart inside him is full of cheer, nor do his limbs get weary until all are ready to give over the fighting. Come then, tell your men to scatter and bid them get ready a meal. And as for the gifts, let the Lord of men, Agamemnon, bring them to the middle of our assembly, so that all the Achaeans can see them before their eyes, so your own heart may be pleasured. And let him stand up before the Argives and swear an oath to you that he never entered into her bed, and never lay with her as is natural for people, my lord, between men and women. And by this let the spirit in your own heart be made gracious. After that, in his own shelter let him appease you with a generous meal, so you will lack nothing of what is due you. And you, son of Atreus, after this be more righteous to another man. For there's no fault when even one who is king appeases a man, when the king was the first one to be angry." Then in turn the lord of men Agamemnon answered him, "Hearing what you have said, son of Laertes, I am pleased with you. Fairly have you gone through everything and explained it. And all this I am willing to swear to, and my heart urges me, and I will not be forsworn before the gods. Let Achilles stay here the while, though he lean very hard toward the work of the war god, and remain the rest of you here assembled, until the gifts come back from my shelter, and while we cut our oaths of fidelity. And for you yourself, Odysseus, I give you this errand, this order, that you choose out excellent young men of all the Achaeans and bring back the gifts here from my ship, all that you promised yesterday to Achilles, and bring the women back also. And in the wide host of the Achaeans, let Talbias make ready a boar for me and dedicate it to Zeus and Helios." Then in answer to him spoke Achilles of the swift feet. "Son of Atreus, most lordly and king of men, Agamemnon, at some other time, rather, you should busy yourself about these things, when there is some stopping point in the fighting, at some time when there is not so much fury inside my heart. But now as things are, they lie there torn, whom the son of Priam Hector has beaten down, since Zeus was giving him glory. And then you urge a man to eating? No, but I would now drive forward the sons of the Achaeans into the fighting, starving and unfed, and afterward, when the sun sets, make ready a great dinner, when we have paid off our defilement. But before this, for me at least, neither drink nor food shall go down in my throat, since my companion has perished and lies inside my shelter torn about with the cutting bronze, and turned against the forecourt while my companions mourn about him. Food and drink mean nothing to my heart, but blood does, and slaughter, and the groaning of men and the hard work." Then in answer to him spoke resourceful Odysseus. "Son of Peleus, Achilles, far greatest of the Achaeans, you are stronger than I am, and greater by not a little with the spear. Yet I in turn might overpass you in wisdom, by far, since I was born before you and have learned many things. Therefore let your heart endure to listen to my words. When there is battle, men have suddenly their fill of it. When the bronze scatters on the ground, the straw in most numbers, and the harvest is most thin. When Zeus has poised his balance, Zeus, who is administrator to men in their fighting. There is no way the Achaeans can mourn a dead man by denying the belly. Too many fall day by day, one upon another, and how could anyone find breathing space from his labor? No, but we must harden our hearts and bury the man who dies. When we have wept over him on the day, and all those who are left about from the hateful work of war must remember food and drink, so that afterward all the more strongly we may fight on forever, relentless against our enemies and the weariless bronze put on about our bodies. Let one not wait longing for any other summons to stir on the people. This summons shall now be evil on anyone left behind by the ships of the Argives. Therefore, let us drive on together and wake the bitter war god on the Trojans, breaker of horses. He spoke and went away with the sons of glorious Nestor, with Meges, the son of Phyleus, and Meronius, and Thoas, and Lycomedes, the son of Creon, and Melanippus. These went on their way to the shelter of Atreus' son Agamemnon. No sooner was the order given than the thing had been done. They brought back 7 tripods from the shelter, those Agamemnon had promised, and 20 shining cauldrons, 12 horses. They brought back immediately the 7 women, the work of whose hands was blameless, and the 8th was Briseis of the fair cheeks. Odysseus weighed out 10 full talents and led them back, and the young men of the Achaeans carried the other gifts. They brought these into the midst of the assembly, and Agamemnon stood up, and Talthybius, in voice like an immortal, stood beside the shepherd of the people with the boar in his hands. Atreus' son laid hands upon his work knife and drew it from where it hung ever beside the great sheath of his war sword, and first cut away hairs from the boar, lifting his hands up to Zeus, prayed, while all the Argives stayed fast at their places in silence and in order of station and listened to their king. He spoke before them in prayer, gazing into the wide sky. Let Zeus first be my witness, highest of the gods and greatest in earth, and Helios the sun, and Furies, who underground avenge dead men. When any man is sworn to a falsehood that I have never laid a hand on the girl Briseis, on pretext to go to bed with her, or for any other reason, but she remain not singled out in my shelter. If any of this is falsely sworn, may the gods give me many griefs, all that they inflict on those who swear falsely before them. So he spoke, and with the pitiless bronze he cut the boar's throat. Talthybius whirled the body about and threw it into the great reach of the gray sea to feed the fishes. Meanwhile, Achilles stood up among the battle-fond Achaeans and spoke to them. Father Zeus, great are the delusions with which you visit men. Without you, the son of Atreus could never have stirred so the heart inside my breast, nor taken the girl away from me against my will, and be in helplessness. No, but Zeus somehow wished their death should befall great numbers of the Achaeans. Go now and take your dinner, so we may draw on the battle. So he spoke, and suddenly broke up the assembly. Now these scattered away, each man to his own ship. Meanwhile, the great-hearted mermaidens disposed of the presents. They went on their way, carrying them to the ship of godlike Achilles, and stowed the gifts in their shelters, and let the women be settled, while proud henchmen drove the horses into Achilles' horse herd. And now, in the likeness of golden Aphrodite, Briseis, when she saw Patroclus lying torn with sharp bronze, folded him in her arms, crying shrilling above him, and with her hands tore at her breasts and her soft throat and her beautiful forehead. The woman, like the immortals mourning for him, spoke to him. Patroclus, far most pleasing to my heart in its most sorrows. I left you here alive when I went away from the shelter. But now I come back, Lord of the people, to find you have fallen. So evil in my life takes over from evil forever. The husband on whom my father and honored mother bestowed me, I saw before my city lying torn with the sharp bronze, and my 3 brothers, whom a single mother bore with me, and who were close to me, all went on one day to destruction. And yet you would not let me, when swift Achilles had cut down my husband and sacked the city of godlike Mynes. You would not let me sorrow, but said you would make me godlike Achilles' wedded lawful wife, that you would take me back to the ships of Phthia and formalize my marriage among the mermaidens. Therefore I weep your death without ceasing. You were kind always. So she spoke, lamenting, and the women sorrowed around her, grieving openly for Patroclus, but for her own sorrows each. But the lords of Achaea were gathered about Achilles, beseeching him to eat, but he with a groan denied them. I beg of you, if any dear companion will listen to me, stop urging me to satisfy the heart in me with food and drink, since this strong sorrow has come upon me. I will hold out till the sun goes down and endure, though it be hard." So he spoke, and caused the rest of the kings to scatter. But the two sons of Atreus stayed with him, and brilliant Odysseus, and Nestor, and Idomeneus, and the aged charioteer Phoenix, comforting him close in his sorrow. Yet his heart would not be comforted till he went into the jaws of the bleeding battle. Remembering Patroclus, he sighed much for him and spoke aloud, "There was a time, ill-fated, O dearest of all my companions, when you yourself would set the desirable dinner before me, quickly and expertly, at the time the Achaeans were urgent to carry sorrowful war on the Trojans, breakers of horses. But now you lie torn before me, and my heart goes starved for meat and drink, though they are here beside me by reason of longing for you. There is nothing worse than this I could suffer, not even I, if I were to hear the death of my father, who now I think in Tia somewhere lets fall a soft tear. For bereavement of such a son, for me, who now in a strange land make war upon the Trojans for the sake of accursed Helen, or the death of my dear son, who is raised for my sake in Scyros. Now, if godlike Neoptolemus is still one of the living. Before now, the spirit inside my breast was hopeful that I alone would die far away from horse-pasturing Argos, here in Troy. I hoped you would win back again in Tia, so that in a fast black ship you would take my son back from Scyros to Tia and show him all my possessions, my property, my serving men, my great high-roofed house. For by this time I think that Peleus must altogether have perished, or still keeps a little scant life in sorrow for the hatefulness of old age, and because he waits ever from me the evil message, for the day he hears, I have been killed." So he spoke, mourning, and the elders lamented around him, remembering each those he had left behind in his own halls. The son of Cronos took pity on them as he watched them mourning, and immediately spoke in winged words to Athena. "My child, have you utterly abandoned the man of your choice? Is there no longer deep concern in your heart for Achilles? Now he has sat down before the steep-horned ships and is mourning for his own beloved companion, while all the others have gone to take their dinner, but he is fasting and unfed. Go then to him and distill nectar inside his chest, and delicate ambrosia, so the weakness of his hunger will not come upon him." Speaking so, he stirred Athena, who was eager before this, and she, in the likeness of a wild-winged, thin-crying hawk, plummeted from the sky through the bright air. Now the Achaeans were arming at once against the encampment. She dropped the delicate ambrosia and the nectar inside the breast of Achilles, softly, so no sad weakness of hunger would come on his knees, and she herself went back to the close house of her powerful father, while they were scattering out away from the fast ships. As, when in the thickness the snowflakes of Zeus came fluttering cold beneath the blast of the north wind born in the bright sky, so now in their thickness the pride of the helms, bright shining, were carried out from the ships, and shields massive in the middle, and the corslets strongly hollowed, and the ash spears were worn forth. The shining swept to the sky, and all earth were laughing about them. Under the glitter of bronze, and beneath their feet stirred the thunder of men, within whose midst brilliant Achilles helmed him. A clash went from the grinding of his teeth, and his eyes glowed as if they were the stare of fire. The heart inside him was entered with sorrow beyond endurance. Raging at the Trojans, he put on the gifts of the god, that Hephaestus wrought him with much toil. First he placed along his legs the fair greaves, linked with silver fastenings to hold the greaves at his ankles. Afterward he girt on about his chest the corslet, and across his shoulders slung the sword with the nails of silver, a bronze sword, and caught up the great shield, huge and heavy, next, and from it the light glimmered afar as from the moon. And as when from across the water a light shines to mariners from a blazing fire, when the fire is burning high in the mountains in a desolate setting, so the mariners are carried unwilling by storm winds over the fish-swarming sea, far away from their loved ones. So the light from the fair, elaborate shield of Achilles shot into the high air. And lifting the helm, he set it massive upon his head, and the helmet crested with horsehair shone like a star. The golden fringes were shaken about it, which Hephaestus had driven close along the horn of the helmet. And brilliant Achilles tried himself in his armor to see if it fitted close, and how his glorious limbs ran within it, and the armor became as wings and upheld the shepherd of the people. Next he pulled out from his standing place the spear of his father, huge, heavy, thick, which no one else of all the Achaeans could handle, but Achilles alone knew how to wield it. The Pelion ash spear, which Cheiron had brought to his father from high on Pelion to be death for fighters in battle. Agamemnon and Alcimus, in charge of the horses, yoked them, and put the fair breast straps about them, and forced the bits home between their jaws, and pulled the reins back against the compacted chariot seat. And one, Agamemnon, took up the shining whip, caught it in his hand, and vaulted up to the charioteer, while behind him Achilles, helmed for battle, took his stance, shining in all his armor like the sun when he crosses above us, and cried in a terrible voice on the horses of his father, Xanthos, Belios, Bay and Dapple, famed sons of Bodarge, take care to bring in another way your charioteer back to the company of the Danaans, when we give over fighting, not leave him to lie fallen there as you did to Patroclus. Then, from beneath the yoke, the gleam-footed horse answered him, Xanthos. And so he bowed his head, so that all the mane fell away from the pad and swept the ground by the cross-yoke. The goddess of the white arms, Hera, had put a voice in him. We shall still keep you safe for this time, O hard Achilles. And yet the day of your death is near. But it is not we who are to blame, but a great God and powerful destiny. For it was not because we were slow, because we were careless, that the Trojans have taken the armor from the shoulders of Patroclus. But it was that high god, the child of lovely-haired Leto, who killed him among the champions and gave the glory to Hector. But for us, we too could run with the blast of the west wind, who they say is the lightest of all things. Yet still for you there is destiny to be killed in force by a god and a mortal. When he had spoken to the Furies, stopped the voice inside him. But deeply disturbed, Achilles of the swift feet answered him, Xanthos, why do you prophesy my death? This is not for you. I myself know well it is destined for me to die here, far from my beloved father and mother. But for all that, I will not stop till the Trojans have had enough of my fighting. He spoke, and shouting, held on in the foremost his single-foot horses.